The day the millionaire was abandoned in a wheelchair, his mansion felt colder than any hospital corridor, because wealth could not warm a heart stripped of dignity. Once surrounded by applause, assistants, and flashing cameras, he now sat motionless at the edge of a manicured lawn, watching a suitcase roll away from him like the last piece of his former life. The accident had taken his legs, but the betrayal took something deeper, leaving him trapped not only in a wheelchair, but in silence, shame, and disbelief at how quickly admiration turns into absence. If you believe kindness still matters in a world that often walks away from the broken, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Ripple of Kindness, because stories of second chances deserve to travel far. Before the fall, he was known as a self-made millionaire whose name glittered in business magazines and charity galas. His days were measured in contracts and victories, his nights in quiet confidence that money could solve most problems. When the accident happened, a sudden collision that crushed his spine and rewrote his future, the hospital room became a waiting chamber for loyalty. At first, visitors came with flowers and sympathy, promising support and patience. But weeks turned into months and patience thinned. The board replaced him, friends stopped calling. Even the woman who once planned holidays around his schedule began packing her things, her smile stiff with relief as she stepped into a future without inconvenience. When he returned home, the house echoed, and the wheelchair felt heavier than steel. Humiliation settled into his routine. He needed help with tasks he once ignored, and every request felt like a reminder of his fall. Staff members resigned quietly, unwilling to adjust to a slower rhythm. Pride kept him from asking neighbors for help, and savings meant little when loneliness arrived every morning before the sun. He spent long hours staring at the wide windows, watching cars pass, feeling like the world had decided to move on without him. The man who once commanded boardrooms now battled the simple act of believing he still mattered. That was when the cleaning lady became impossible to ignore. She arrived early each morning, pushing her cart with careful determination, her uniform plain and her presence almost invisible to those who measured worth by titles. She had been hired long before the accident, and after it, she became one of the few constants left. While others avoided eye contact, she treated him with steady respect, not pity, not fear. She cleaned slowly, deliberately, as if the house were still alive and deserving of care. When she passed him, she nodded gently, acknowledging him as a person rather than a burden. Her own life carried quiet scars. She had been humiliated before, dismissed by employers who spoke over her, by a society that rarely noticed the hands that scrubbed its floors. She understood what it meant to be seen only when something went wrong. Each day, she watched the millionaire shrink further into himself, his shoulders heavy, his eyes dim with a grief that went beyond paralysis. Without announcing it, she began staying a little longer, making sure the pathways were clear. The sunlight reached him, and the silence felt less sharp. Change came slowly, almost imperceptibly. One afternoon, when a storm trapped them inside, she adjusted his chair so he could face the rain instead of the wall. The gesture was small, but it cracked something open. Another day, she left a warm cup of tea within reach before continuing her work, a simple act that said he was worth the effort. He began to notice the rhythm of her steps, the care in her work, and the fact that she never rushed away from him. In a world that had abandoned him, her consistency became a lifeline. As weeks passed, the mansion no longer felt like a monument to loss but a place where healing tried to take root. He started waking earlier, listening for the sounds of cleaning, allowing himself to be present instead of hiding behind silence. The humiliation that once burned began to soften, replaced by a fragile gratitude. He realized that kindness did not come from contracts or loyalty agreements, but from choice. She chose every day not to abandon him. Suspense lingered in the air because life rarely rewards goodness immediately. Bills mounted, legal battles drained energy, rumors about his downfall circulated, painting him as finished, yet within those walls, something quietly powerful was happening. The cleaning lady's dignity reminded him of his own. Her perseverance challenged his despair. He began to imagine a future not defined by what he lost, but by what remained. Strength returned not to his legs, but to his spirit. The turning point arrived when an old contact reached out, intrigued by his resilience and willing to invest in a new venture that did not require him to stand to lead. This opportunity came not from his former status, but from the humility he had learned. He credited the shift to the days spent watching someone who had every reason to walk away, yet stayed. As success slowly returned, he ensured that her life changed too, not as charity, but as recognition of shared humanity. Near the end of this journey, when the mansion buzzed again with purpose and light, he understood the true cost of abandonment and the priceless value of loyalty. The wheelchair was no longer a symbol of shame, but a reminder of the moment his life was rebuilt by compassion rather than wealth. The humiliated cleaning lady had never needed millions to be rich. Her kindness had already made her powerful. If this story touched your heart, if you felt the weight of abandonment and the healing power of compassion, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Because your engagement helps spread stories that remind us who we can be. Before the ending, here is a special request. Please comment below and share what kindness means to you or a moment when someone stayed when others left. The millionaire was abandoned in a wheelchair, but he was not destroyed because one person chose to see him when the world turned away. And sometimes that single act of staying is enough to turn despair into purpose, silence into hope, and humiliation into a quiet, unforgettable victory.